The normal all rise business today, and welcome to our regular City Council meeting, and we'll be immediately following with a special meeting right afterwards. We've got everyone abundantly spaced out around our large council chamber here, and everybody does have their own microphone, so you'll be able to hear them. We have two council members that are calling in by teleconferencing, Councillors Ron Brown and Councillor Chris Desjardins. So we're going to do our best to make sure we don't miss hearing their input as well. We've got a fairly lengthy agenda. You get a bunch of business done, and so without further ado, I'll ask you for the first item of business, Madam Clerk.
Roll call, Your Worship. I've taken the roll and all members of council are present, including Councillor Desjardins and Councillor Brown via teleconference.
Very good. Thank you. Next item, please.
Now, a motion to adopt this evening's agenda, Your Worship.
Moved by Councillor Cullen, seconded by Councillor Lupke. Any additions or changes? Seeing none, call for the question. All those in favour? Opposed? And Councillors Brown and Desjardins, are you in favour?
Yes.
Thank you. Next item, please.
A motion to confirm the minutes of the regular meeting held March 16th.
Moved by Councillor Cameron, seconded by Councillor Chaboyer. Any errors or omissions? And not seeing any, call for the question then. All those in favour? Opposed? And for Councillors Desjardins and Brown, I'm just going to pause each time, and if you want to either oppose or ask a question, please just pipe up. Next item of business, please.
A confirmation of the minutes of the April 6th special meeting.
Moved by Councillor Parker, seconded by Councillor Lupke. Again, any errors or omissions, changes? Again, seeing none, call for the question. All those in favour? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Under the order of public hearings, is a public hearing to discuss the 2020 financial plan.
Get Mr. Hammond to come forward. A few items first. This will be a little bit of a different hearing, no doubt.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. As part of the Municipal Act, we are required to submit an annual financial plan, and as part of the budgeting process, we prepare the financial plan, and it is exactly that. It is a plan, and in any given year, we often deviate from our plan. We need to dodge and weave accordingly, depending on circumstances, and this year will definitely be no different. But anyways, back to the plan that we're proposing for you tonight. I'm here to give you a few details. So our proposed operating expense on the general fund for 2020 is $83.8 million, an increase of a little more than $700,000, or a 0.9 increase in expense. When we look at the breakdown of the revenues, so for municipalities must have a balanced budget. We're not allowed to run a deficit, so revenues have to match expenses. So if I can draw your attention to the bottom left corner, this year 23.1% of our proposed revenues are to come from other levels of government. If I can draw your attention to the three buckets on the top left, the city has the ability to generate its own fees and incomes, fines, licenses, etc., and that's typically about a quarter of the budget. The remainder, of course, has to come from property taxes, which this year represents 55.6% of the budget. That number is actually exactly the same as last year. When we look at the expense side of the budget, The largest category of spend is protective services. This is, of course, police, fire, ambulance, 911, and emergency management services at 37.8%. The next bucket is our operating infrastructure projects, which typically makes up about a quarter of the budget, followed by parks, culture and recreation, support services, transit, growth, economic development and housing, and finally sanitation. In terms of the capital budget, we have a proposed $68.3 million capital budget, 15.5 million of which is funded by debt. 13 million of that is for this year's contributions to the water treatment facility project and upgrades. And then you'll see that we are good savers. A lot of our projects are funded by our own general fund or utility fund reserves. And then there's a small smattering of projects that are supported by property taxes, as well as some provincial and federal grant funds. When we look at the city's debt portfolio in the general fund, this year we will have almost $26 million of outstanding debt, and payments on which are $2.3 million. So our debt payments as a percent of the operating budget are a little under 3%, very low. When we look at debt levels in other Manitoba municipalities, either on a per capita or a percentage basis, our use of debt is very low, particularly on the general side. On the utility side, we are taking on more debt, primarily for the upgrades to the water treatment facility. So for the utility side, we have $9.8 million of outstanding debt to be repaid, and a further $16 million authorized as part of the water treatment facility upgrade. When we look at the residential property tax impact, in 2019, the somewhat typical or average residential property in Brandon was roughly $262,000 in assessed value. That increases to roughly $270,000 this year. This is a reassessment year, and city properties on average went up by 3%. And then with this year's tax levy, that would increase the municipal tax levy to $1,900 this year, or an increase of just under $9 or 0.47%. Now that 0.47% increase, that's the average across all properties. Of course, with this being a reassessment year, some properties will see an increase more than that. Some properties will see an increase less than that. Some properties may even see a decrease in their taxes. This is, of course, for the municipal portion of your taxes only. School division taxes would be on top of this. And when we're talking about budgets in the tens of millions of dollars, I always like to put some perspective to it. So for that typical residential properties, $1,900 municipal tax bill, this is how it would break down in terms of our 7 different spending categories, both in dollars and percentage. And I always like to do the cost per day, because when we're talking budgets in the millions of dollars, this is what the typical residential property will experience on a per day basis. And we know that services such as protective services and looking after our city are expensive, but even when you take protective services, our largest bucket, again including police, fire, ambulance, and 911 services, on a per day basis, it's less than a cup of coffee. And all city services added up are a little more than $5 per day. If anyone wants more information on the budget, our 2020 financial plan is on the City of Brandon website, as well as this presentation. Reminders for property tax payers, as part of the property tax levy bylaw, which will be coming up shortly at this meeting, the property tax due date is recommended to be extended to July 31st this year. Normally it's June 30th, but in light of the COVID crisis, it's appropriate to give people a little more time to pay if they want to continue with the annual payment. If you do want to take advantage of the annual payment, there are discounts available in April and May. If you're on our tax installment plan, then of course your monthly payments continue. Note this year that you have the ability to undertake flexible or variable payments under the tax installment program. And if you're not on that program, then you have until July 15th to sign up for that. And if you need to reach out to the finance department to discuss your taxes or to make alternative arrangements, then you can call 729-2228 or 729-2592, or you can email us at taxes@brandon.ca. A reminder, City Hall is closed to the public, but please phone us or reach us by email and we will get back to you. And a very fast presentation. With that, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
And Councillor Reggio, just before we start, I'll just kind of lay out the process a little bit. Normally, this would be the sort of public hearing. Pardon me, I guess the public hearing is coming up. So this is just the presentation of the budget, and we'll get to those other. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Reggio.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Dean, I know there's an inquiry coming up later on that I have about what's happening in the public, and you did mention 23% of the government grants are financing our financial plan. So I was just wondering if you just wanted to touch on what's been happening in the past couple of months, how it's going to impact the city, or do you want to wait until we have the inquiries and we'll deal with it then?
Well, this would be a good time. Yeah.
Through your worship to Councillor Reggio, yes, a little less than a quarter of our budget is, our revenues come from other levels of government, and we rely on those revenues to be able to do what we do. At this time, there's no indication that anything different is going to happen, so we're under the assumption at this point in time that those grant funds will continue.
Okay.
Our regular kind of basket funding, block funding, if you will, from the province. We had already received the letter from the minister outlining our amount, which, not surprising, was precisely the same as last year. In fact, I think it was 58 cents more than last year, just to put a fine point on it. But that arrived just before the kind of COVID-19 response started. So I guess we do have a letter in hand sort of authorizing what we're getting in 2020. Whether any changes are made to that remains to be seen. We would hope that there wouldn't be any, especially given that we're operating on sort of frozen funding for 4 years anyways.
I'll wait till the inquiry before I get into the other stuff. Thank you very much.
So we take other questions from councillors, and then we do have a process that allows the public to come in, but first we'll sort of seed the conversation with councillors if they have some. I know council has been through this budget a lot, so they may have less questions, obviously, but I will state that although, as council knows, we don't normally get a lot of people that come out for this hearing on any given year, but to make sure that we are still providing public with an opportunity to provide input. We certainly made it known if people had representation that they wanted to make, they could send emails in, they could contact their councillor, they could drop it off at our mailbox in a written fashion. And then right now, as this is being televised live on the city's YouTube channel, there is a provision that people can submit their questions live on YouTube, so Heather's monitoring that. I can't say that we didn't receive any written submissions in advance, and it doesn't seem like we've got a lot of action on the YouTube either. So we are certainly doing our very best to exercise the openness and transparency that we always do, but certainly having to use alternative means. So before we ask Mr. Hammond to vacate the podium, we'll just ask one more time if any councillors had any questions. Councillor Fawcett?
Yes, thank you, through your worship, to Mr. Hammond. Of course, like the province and like others, this is a budget that we put together prior to all of this. And this is still what we present, knowing full well that it is going to be a difficult budget to adapt to. But just for clarity's sake, I guess, it is the budget that we prepared and has not been adapted to current times. It will get adapted, as Mr. Hammond said, while moving, sort of moving forward. So some things that are in there may not be in there come spring. For example, I am of the understanding things like tennis courts may not get done this year. We have it in the budget, and that's just to try and conserve and save some different things at different areas, and we'll get it back in there for next year, stuff like that. So it is the budget we worked on, presented, or are presenting now. Obviously, things have changed, so it's like everyone else. It's I don't know if Dean wants to expand on that at all. He kind of mentioned it earlier, but.
Go ahead.
Through your worship to Councillor Fawcett, yes. In any given year, our financial plan is just that. It is a plan. It's our best forecast at the beginning of the year in terms of what we would like to achieve for our city, both in terms of the services we deliver and the capital projects that we deliver. So we do plan accordingly. A lot of effort goes into the budgeting process and the planning process. But the reality is, in any given year, depending on the resources available and timing and everything else, we do always adjust accordingly. We strive to deliver the services we say we're going to deliver, and we strive to deliver the projects we want to deliver. We do know this year that's going to be different.
And as Councillor Fawcett indicated, even the province, they actually delivered their budget pretty much the day that Manitoba got its first case. And then really things erupted after that. You know, they still went ahead and passed the budget that they intended to present, and are already now starting to make changes to things that they had budgeted for. So council can expect to see a great deal of things to consider in the weeks and months ahead, and finance department is just now pulling all that together, and it'll probably go to the audit and finance committee first, as it routinely does, and then on to council, and before long we'll start to see some changes emerge. You know, we're going to do our very best to leave the city on a strong financial foundation, recognizing that foundation is our individual taxpayers, and a lot of individual taxpayers are having their own significant issues with income and businesses closed and people laid off and the like. So we're going to need to do our best to, you know, deal with this as much internally as we can. We think that there'll be strategies for quite a bit of that, and we'll all put our heads together and find the best path to that, so that we don't leave ourselves in huge debt or deficit, and that we're ready to rock and roll again next year and just pick up where we left off. So, Councillor Parker.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through yourself to Dean and perhaps yourself. I'm just curious, like the budget itself and this financial plan itself was put together, you know, jointly, obviously through administration and council. And so those changes, there will be some changes that are pretty minor in the plan as it goes forward. There will also be some fairly significant changes. And so at what point does council as a whole get together and have input into what some of those major changes look like? Is it a case of administration going back to the various managers and determining what's what's a priority and what's a sort of a secondary project, and bringing that to council and council making the decision, or is it just going to come and say, here you go, this is what we've decided to do? So I'd like to kind of know the process a little bit, just so that everybody's aware, and then if residents do have any specific input or opinion on priorities, et cetera, they can communicate with their councillor about that.
Do you want to go first, or?
Through your worship, to Councillor Parker. So as council is aware, it takes months and months and months to put together a budget, and now with this crisis we need to upend all of that budget and replan accordingly on short order. So that is a complicated process to do that. So I can speak to some of the things we're working on. The thing is, though, these things I'm going to speak to don't occur in a vacuum. They often play against each other. So obviously we're looking at our capital program. Myself and finance and the chiefs and the general managers have met, and we've reprioritized projects accordingly, basically into 3 categories. We have our list of projects that we want to proceed this year. We have a list of projects that may proceed this year if time permits, cash flow permits, and we have the necessary human resources to be able to manage those projects. And lastly is projects that just simply are not going to occur this year, and we're going to have to reschedule those for some other time. So there's that on the capital side. On the operating side, we're obviously going through our budget as part of we have our April budget review coming up right away. And with that, departments will be given some specific assumptions about how they are to prepare their budget reviews. We have to make some assumptions about how long this crisis will last, when we can potentially get back to normal, or if we even will be able to get back to normal in some areas for this year. So budget review is coming as well, and that typically comes to audit and finance for review. That, alongside our capital program, will be coming to audit finance, and then with that we'll be looking for specific direction from audit and finance, whether you want that information to come before council, and whether council would like to have their say in that revised list of projects or services to be delivered.
Yeah, so, we would certainly anticipate administration, it's kind of really not unlike the budget process. Administration, kind of boils it all down in kind of detail, and then comes back with, what you could say like a recommendation to council. And we can kind of puzzle through it as a collectively, council and administration. This is uncharted territory, so we're going to do the best, and council obviously is in the driver's seat here. We'll find ways to solicit input from the community where we can, and find a path to get us through the year and keep services going, and keep our city nicely maintained, and still pay the bills.
Thanks. Just a quick follow-up, and I'll get an answer as I sit on the Audit and Finance Committee, so I'm sure the answer will be coming forward there. But with the budget process, we allocate X amount of funds to all of the various pools that we have and the reserves that we have in place, and I'm sure we'll work through the mechanics of how we either reverse that or how we deal with that should that become a necessity later on in the year. But I'm assuming those processes will come through to Audit and Finance, and we'll deal with it and then bring it forward for the rest of council and everybody else does.
It'll be no more complicated than budget. Any other questions about the financial plan before we end up concluding the hearing? We're going to hear, we haven't had any submissions yet online, so if council doesn't have any. Thank you very much, Mr. Hammond. I think we're safe to...
Would you mind moving that conference?
We've got both Councillors Brown and Desjardins also on text technology over here, so if we do miss them, they're going to text in. But so far, so good. With that, a motion to conclude the public hearing would be in order. Councillor Reggio, seconded by Councillor Cameron. Any discussion? Seeing none, call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Under the order of committee reports, Your Worship, a report from the Western Manitoba Centennial Auditorium.
And Councillor Fawcett.
Yes, thank you, through Your Worship. What we'll be doing kind of going forward is have our General Manager, Tom Crook, and the Chair coming to do an annual presentation, just like we get from the Riverbank and Keystone Center.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in the meantime, I did want to get out there publicly what we were looking at for this year's capital plan. And of course, unfortunately, the doors are not open right now at the auditorium, but I did have it handed out to everyone there, but I'll quickly run through it. Some of the infrastructure upgrades and repairs. We were looking at replacing the electrical wiring in our mechanical room, replacing the plumbing in the basement, which is a phase 2 of a project there. Accessibility ramp in the front of the building needs resurfacing. That's the original surface on there still. Replace the north and south stage doors. We're repairing the basement rooms, the walls, the doors, and repainting them. We have equipment upgrades that we're going to be doing this year. The new water fountain to replace the south end foyer. And then our stage upgrade requirements we have this year are the stage inspection for deficiencies and compliance. LED lighting upgrades, which is a fairly large one for us. The lighting control panel. And 220 amperage upgrade that needs to happen. So that was just a sort of a real quick, anticipated it's a total cost of about $75,000, which between the province and the city are you the funders for that. But that is an upgrade capital plan for 2020 for the auditorium, which we want to make sure that we're annually putting out there.
Thank you. Any questions of Councillor Fawcett on this report? Just out of curiosity, like the conversations we're having among council and other organizations, are presuming this plan was crafted before things kind of broke loose here, anticipating being able to still work through most of these, or?
Yes, the goal is I hope to work through most of them, but like everybody else, our budget is significantly being affected at the auditorium as everywhere else, not be having doors open. So not everything may fit into this year.
Okay. Any other questions of Councillor Fawcett? Just communicating with the other councillors here. So seeing none, we can move on. Sometimes we have other committee reports that we were not aware of, so we could take those now verbally if there are any. Not seeing any. A motion to accept the WMCA report would be in order. Moved by Councillor Parker, seconded by Councillor Fawcett. Any discussion? Call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
The order of inquiries, Your Worship.
So we do, I will just point out when the time comes that Councillor Desjardins switched off of the teleconference, went to the live stream, so he'd like some other councillor to read his inquiry if somebody has them. I have them if necessary, but we'll start with Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. I had an inquiry about this year's Green Cart program. So I've got 4 questions, so maybe if I could...
yeah, just read them all out, and I think they're ready for you. Yep.
Okay. When will the Green Cart program be started, and are there any changes to the program this year? Also, is there going to be information out to the public on what should not be put in the bins to ensure that we have a high quality compost for the program? And will the compost be made available for the citizens?
Very good, thank you. And Acting City Manager Dean Hammond, is a response ready for you?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Chaboyer, this response has been provided by Ian Broom, the Acting General Manager of Operations. Tentatively, the Green Cart program will start on May 5th. This is weather dependent. As if we have more snow before then and it hasn't dried up, the program will be delayed. At this time, the bins have been placed at the depots for yard and waste collection should residents not be able to wait until May 5th. There are no changes to the program at this time. To say when it will end is weather dependent. In the past, we will try to continue collection into the first week of November in order to capture the Halloween bags full of leaves. Regarding communication with the public, there will be some sort of media correspondence on this, and as always, the webpage for sanitation is very informational. And regarding compost, compost is available to citizens now. We would recommend that they call ahead to 204-729-2281 in order to make sure that there would be staff there to assist if needed. That number again, 204-729-2281.
Did that cover it, Councillor Chaboyer?
Just one little comment on the report. It's mentioned about collecting up the Halloween bags. My understanding is that you do not want bags put in the leaf depots, correct, or the compost depots?
Mr. Broom's going to come forward and...
I'm just trying to recall my tour of the operation, and the bags were a problem.
Right, through your worship to Councillor Chaboyer, we don't encourage the plastic bags, but what we've learned in the past, we're just happy to get the product. When it goes through our compost turner, we take a soft disc grinder and shave them off, then discard the plastic in the landfill. A lot of residents are on board and will empty the bags and take them back and throw them out accordingly, but we do get an awful lot of contamination in the way of plastic.
Well, thank you. I guess the most important thing there is that if they could take a minute to empty the bags if they're using the depots, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And next, Councillor Fawcett.
Yes, through your worship, on behalf of Councillor Desjardins, municipal councils across Canada are demonstrating leadership to flatten the curve by moving their council meetings using online using Zoom, Skype, Teams, or other video conference tools. My understanding was that we were waiting for direction from the province to quickly amend or approve circumvention of the Municipal Act to allow Manitoba's municipalities to do the same. Has there been an update?
Thank you, Councillor Desjardins. And again, back to Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Desjardins. This response has been provided by Heather Wozniak, the Director of Legislative Services and the City Clerk. The Municipal Act framework establishes two formats for council meetings and public hearings. The Act requires council meetings to be open to the public to ensure a transparent decision-making process and to allow the public to observe council's deliberations. To achieve this while preventing the spread of the virus, several methods of providing public access to council deliberations in an alternate format are available to municipalities. Some examples may include, but are not limited to, live streaming, teleconferences, and/or providing recordings of council meetings. Any method employed should provide a comparable level of access to the public as attendance at a council meeting would have. Closing a meeting to the physical presence of the general public and providing alternate means to engage should not be confused with closing a meeting to the public under subsection 152(3) of the Municipal Act, where the public is not permitted to observe council deliberations in any form. For public hearings, the public hearing process is designed to encourage public participation and to ensure that citizens have an opportunity to provide information and feedback to council for their consideration when making specific decisions. On April 1st of this year, a new public health order came into effect that limits public gatherings to no more than 10 people at any indoor or outdoor place or premise. This does not apply to the operations or service delivery of municipalities, as outlined in Section 3.4 of the Public Health Order. However, where possible, it is recommended that public hearings be deferred until May. For decisions where public hearings cannot be deferred, municipalities are encouraged to use an alternate format for public hearings where possible, provided that the public can exercise an equivalent level of involvement as if they physically attended the public hearing. Particularly, public hearings must allow any person who wishes to make a presentation, ask questions, or register an objection to do so, provided for in subsection 163 of the Municipal Act. Public participation may be met through interactive technology such as Skype, GoToMeetings, or conference calls, or by written submission. Should an alternative format not be available, then municipalities must ensure that appropriate social distancing measures are in place. If Council cannot meet the legislative requirements for public hearings, they should be postponed.
Thank you very much. Very thorough response. We are going to be talking a little bit later about how Council is going to move forward over the next few meetings. Whatnot. By the way, for those looking on at home, we did not task Councillors Cameron and Cullen to come up with some new mood lighting, Hollywood lighting on us. Just the sun shines over the top windows and changes the perspective here once in a while. So I feel like I'm in the limelight for a change. Next up, Councillor Reggio.
Thank you, Your Worship. My inquiry we touched on briefly during the budget presentation, but with finances possibly impacted by COVID, has staff of the city started to look at what projects could be impacted by a delay or postponement? Also, it may be early, but with provincial dollars going towards COVID, how will this impact the city, if at all? And are we looking at reduced grant dollars? I know there was a partial answer, but with the province changing their minds daily and weekly, I just wanted to know if we're kind of looking at that.
Very good. And Mr. Hammond did have a response ready for you. So.
Through your worship, to Councillor Reggio, this response was provided by me. In response to the COVID-19 crisis, myself and the finance team have been looking into the state of the city's finances. We recognize that we're going to face revenue shortfalls this year and/or cash flow challenges. Regarding projects, myself, the Director of Finance, and the Manager of Procurement have met with each Chief or General Manager to review their 2020 project lists. Knowing that we won't be able to undertake all projects due to time constraints, labor constraints, or cash flow needs, we have reprioritized every project into 3 categories. Firstly are those projects that must proceed, and every attempt will be made to ensure that happens. Secondly are projects that may proceed later in this year if timing or resources allow for it to happen. And lastly are projects that have been outright cancelled for this year. Regarding grant dollars, approximately 1/4 of the city's revenues comes from other levels of government. To date, we have had no indication from the federal or provincial governments that funding dollars for municipalities are about to be reduced. And regarding some other measures we're taking regarding this year's budget, regarding labor expense, approximately 170 part-time, casual, and temporary employees have either been laid off or else will not be recalled for the 2020 season. Permanent employees have been redeployed to fill gaps in service delivery. A hiring freeze has been implemented for any vacant positions. Regarding expenses, administration is currently preparing for a very different April budget review. This morning, the emergency operations team defined some assumptions about the duration and impact of the COVID crisis that department heads will use as inputs for their April budget reviews. Once the April budget review is complete, we will have a better understanding of our potential expenses for the remainder of the year and/or whether additional cuts will be required. Note that I have implemented a spending freeze across all of the organization, which includes such things as travel, professional development, equipment purchases, and all non-discretionary spending. Once the April budget review is complete, myself and the finance team will meet with the Audit and Finance Committee to review the results and/or to discuss next steps for our revised 2020 planning.
Thank you. Another very thorough response. You good with that?
Worship, if I may, just a quick follow-up. Thank you. I received a few calls since I submitted my inquiry about our personnel, and also a couple of inquiries about transit. I'm wondering if we can just get a report prepared on transit, because We have the buses running. Ridership obviously is down considerably. We're not collecting fares. So I'm just wondering if we can get a report as to, how much we're losing, how much it's costing us to operate it, and are there plans to maybe cut back on some of the transit while we're in the midst of COVID, because having buses running empty or with one person just doesn't seem to make sense. So I'll throw that out there.
Yeah, appreciate that. So obviously that'll be part and parcel of the overall financial and budget review that administration is doing, and also the administration are just looking at alternatives to the transit and actually seeing whether or not there's provision to be able to at least start collecting payment again. And so they're looking at potentially shields for the drivers and things like that. It's early into it. They've just kind of started to look at that. So you can expect to hear back, more on that. The difficulty is a little bit like to have a complete network. Like we've still got a lot of people that need to go to work for sort of essential services. Maple Leaf Foods certainly being a big one. All those grocery stores and pharmacies that continue to service people's needs. And while the numbers are down, it still kind of requires the whole network to be able to get them from point A to point B. But they're going to, look at any potential alternatives and report back to us on that.
I appreciate the very thorough report. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Chaboy?
Thank you, Worship. I'd just like to add to that. I'm hoping at some point we have kind of a post-pandemic way of looking at the operation if we are going to need protective equipment for all departments, beyond transit, if we need shields in other areas and masks, and that is considered as well in your budget discussions with all the departments. Because I think prior to getting through the summer and reducing the curb and everything else, that I don't think it's going to be normal for quite a while, and we want to ensure that we're practicing the best health and safety in the corporation. And so things like, physical distancing, spots on the floor, or there might be shields up in the cashier's area, and those types of equipment I think should be looked at in all departments, not just strictly one, area. So.
Yeah, quite well taken.
Yeah, thanks.
And Councillor Cameron?
Your Worship, through you to the City Manager, I have a couple that are non-COVID related just to throw into the mix this evening. So I did have a couple of residents contact me over the last few weeks wondering about the speed limit in school zones right now. Normally, as we know, they're reduced to 30 kilometers an hour for both the designated time and day as well as the time of year. I spoke too soon. With the current COVID-19 pandemic, would the city be able to provide an update as to whether those speed zones are still being enforced?
Again, back to Mr. Hammond.
Through your worship to Councillor Cameron, this response has been provided by Sam Van Housen, Traffic and Transportation Planner. School zones are normally enforced between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday in the months of September through June. These are in effect on holidays and professional development days when school is not in session. Such the same is said during the time that school is out during the social distancing to combat the COVID-19 crisis. It is the understanding of the engineering department that these speed zones should still be in effect and subject to enforcement by police services.
Go ahead, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have another one, if I may. Many of the residents along McDonald Avenue have been challenged with the tough end of the construction year last year and some challenging road conditions this spring. I was wondering if the city would be able to provide an update and feedback as to when, weather permitting, the completion of this project would be undertaken, and whether the city would be able to provide an update via the contractor when extra remediation work in the interim will be completed.
And again, back to Mr. Hammond.
Through your worship, this response has been provided by Aaron Kaluzniak. Sorry, Aaron. Acting Director of Engineering Services. The city has met with the McDonald Avenue contractor to discuss resuming operations when the seasonal shutdown ends this spring. Both the city and the contractor have been preparing for safe work protocols to conduct the work during the COVID-19 pandemic. Tentatively, weather permitting and COVID-19 permitting, the contractor expects to return to the site to start the final repair work the first week in May. The city will provide notice to residents prior to the work resuming. In the interim, the contractor has and will continue to regularly maintain the road in order to keep it as passable as possible during the spring melt and thaw.
Carry on.
Your Worship, I'll continue on a roll here. First of all, thank you to Mr. Kluzniak for his work on continuing to keep the residents updated there, and we look forward to that work continuing. Another one, if I may, when will the city's back lane remediation work begin for this year?
Mr. Hammond?
Through your worship, this response has been provided by Travis Woloshan, Charge Hand Streets and Roads. Backlane remediation work began on April 15th in the East End, with equipment working its way west by sections in coordination with garbage pickup. So that work has already commenced.
Well, we're on that before you go on to the next one, and Mr. Broom would be happy to have us update this because it kind of ties in that, so that does sort of remind people that we are continuing on with our regular work, and street sweeping started last Wednesday, so again easily as early as ever, and pothole patching started prior to that, and so that's going in full force. And again, people can always be mindful of the pothole report line or do so online. So again, we do want to emphasize that a lot of those critical general maintenance things is business as usual as best we can. So on to your next one, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll echo that statement in the sense that it's very comforting in a way for residents to know that work is continuing and that it'll continue throughout the pandemic. I'll finish with one more, if I could, through Your Worship, to Mr. Hammond. Just had a request with regards to, since we know that fluorescent bulbs and compact fluorescent lights contain a certain amount of mercury, which can be harmful to the environment as well as to humans, animals, and those who may come into contact with them. Just wondering what the procedure is for people to dispose of these in a safe manner. And this was brought up by a resident recently, so I wanted to be able to get this information out for the public.
And probably timely, because with people having time on their hands, they're probably doing a lot of spring cleanup, cleaning out garages and basements. And so again, Mr. Hammond has a response.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the councillor, this response has been provided by Ian Broom, the Acting General Manager of Operations. Fluorescent tubes and lights can be taken to the landfill during normal operating hours. Note right now, the landfill is remaining under winter hours, which is Monday through Saturday, 8 to 5, and closed on Sundays and stat holidays. If you're bringing such materials, proceed to the scale and let the attendant know what material and quantity you have before leaving the building. At no time should these bulbs be replaced in the refuse or the recycling bins. Residents can drop off up to 16 bulbs or tubes at one time at the landfill, and a commercial source can drop off one pallet of tubes or bulbs. A pallet of light bulbs should contain approximately 750 4-foot fluorescent tubes or 1,200 CFLs, or a combination of light types that would equate to the same volume.
There you go. Now we know what goes on a pallet of light bulbs. That was all that we were aware of, but sometimes there's other questions that came in later. Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. I had some communication with Dr. Kristen Lowett, who's the chair of the Brandon Food Council, and ideally this request would happen through the Poverty Committee, but we haven't met. So the Food Council is concerned about the impact on our food systems with the pandemic, and wants to ensure that food security practices, food security will be reached in our city. And They wanted to know if there was a way they could still work with the city to talk about things like making sure that the community gardens continue to happen this year, because food production is extremely important, and it's affordable for people when they're in crisis situation now for lost jobs and everything else. So gardening is important, but at the same time we have to recognize physical distancing, so there might be ways we might have to change practices. So they wanted to appeal to the city and wonder if they could have a conversation with community services on some of this, and maybe other ways of what's going to happen with various food markets and how we can distribute food in the community. So ideally, yeah, they could meet with community services, but I did prepare a motion if council would be interested in something like that, or there's a way that we can make this happen. So there would be a conversation between community services and the food council.
Yeah, I don't think we'll need a motion. I don't think there'd be any problem in facilitating through administration
Okay.
an outreach. If you can later just supply the information of the individuals, probably email addresses or telephone numbers, and through to Mr. Hammond, and he can get it through to the people. I wouldn't anticipate that we're going to make any changes to the community garden program, but we've not specifically talked about that. But again,
Yeah,
I think
I'll
I
give
did
the-
read about farmers markets and the like. I thought that the province had indicated a program that those can proceed, but I don't want to swear to that. So I think all of that types of things you're talking about in terms of food security and people's ability to grow their own food and get food from farmers is being contemplated even at a provincial level. So
Okay. Yeah, I'll communicate the contact information for Dr. Loet with you. Yeah, thanks.
okay, thank you. Any others inquiries that we might have missed? We recognize we don't have as many meetings as normal, so there's more inquiries tonight than some nights. So, okay, not seeing any. Thank you all for those. Next item, Madam Clerk.
The order of announcements, Your Worship.
Announcements. I'll put one in, I suppose it could be an announcement. One of the best parts of this job is I periodically get to go to schools for various activities, the best of which is reading to young kids. And so right now, most young kids are having to do their schooling at home, which is an added challenge to parents and caregivers and teachers, of course, that are having to get to all of that work out to them, and the kids trying to stay disciplined to get through that. So with the help of my son, as a bit of a videographer, I did record the reading of 5 books, and we've loaded them up onto the city's YouTube channel. Now, they'll probably be also in council's wheelhouse, because it's things like Fox and Socks, Green Eggs and Ham, so it's for little kids and or city councilors. So again, they can be easily found by Googling the City of Brandon YouTube channel, and then they'll be readily apparent. There's about 5 books, and so we thought we'd kind of help the people at home that are continuing with their studies, and just maybe break up the real learning, and they could take a little diversion and encouragement by listening to my ability to read these books. I'm no Robert Munch, but they might work. So that's out there right now. So, any other announcements that the councillors may have? Seeing none, next item of business, please.
Under the order of general business, Your Worship, the 2020 financial plan.
Very good. So we had the presentation by Mr. Hammond earlier in the hearing, so it's fairly straightforward. Probably putting a motion on the floor would be in order, and then we can debate. Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the 2020 financial plan of the City of Brandon, dated April 20th, 2020, is set out in the form approved by the Minister of Municipal Relations, a copy of which is attached to the report of the Director of Finance dated April 6, 2020, be so adopted. And further, that the operating and capital estimates outlined in said plan be incorporated in and form part of the 2020 tax levy bylaw.
Seconder, please. Councillor Reggio. Discussion. Mover wish to speak?
No, Your Worship, I think the presentation we had from Mr. Hammond and even some of the follow-up questions from some of our fellow councillors kind of covered the topic quite well.
And seconder wish to speak? Any other discussion? It does seem like a bit of a hollow commentary to make. Council should be extremely proud, council and all of administration, for the work that went into, again, overcome difficulties. We've always had to kind of keep the belt tight in respect of our taxpayers and come up with a very sound budget that continues to maintain this facility, this community rather, and a very robust capital plan this year, and still do it with a 0.47% tax increase proposed. So that would have been the speech. However, we've had a bit of a curveball thrown at us by Mother Nature, or certainly medical nature. I don't know what we're calling this pandemic. So it may be a little twist, but the only thing I would say to that is that the foundation that I guess the last couple of councils have provided, we've had very, very modest tax increases year after year after year. Will certainly, provide us with a, better foundation, better, sort of starting point when going into this, and also a council that has shown itself to be very budget savvy, to be able to kind of stick handle through complicated and difficult situations. And so I think those skills and those characteristics are going to do our community proud in terms of being able to face this challenge as well. So again, it's a hollow comment to approve a 0.47% tax increase, which is probably one of the most modest anywhere in the country, and we're proud of it, but we'll still have our work cut out for us throughout the year, and still maneuvering our finances to get us to a non-deficit at the end of the year, which we're mandated to do. So unless there's any further discussion, I'm going to end up calling the question. Seeing none, call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Next item, please.
Is an incentive grant for the redevelopment of 3409 Victoria Avenue.
Now, I'm just going to, given that this development is adjacent to my own property and business, as I have been any discussions on this matter, I'm going to absent myself. I apologize. I didn't give anybody a heads up, so the deputy mayor isn't really in a great position to take over, so I'll have to ask the acting deputy mayor to take over, if you don't mind, Councillor Barry. You can probably do it from there if you like, if you can see everybody. Sure. As long as you can see me.
No.
All right.
Let him sit in the big chair.
Just don't drink the water.
Okay. Promise not to touch your glass.
Or touch
I
anything.
would note Sandy is on the phone if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you're right, this was unexpected. I did not expect to be sitting here tonight. Next order of business, then, I guess, Madam Clerk. And we'll...
Is the redevelopment grant for 3409 Victoria Avenue.
Okay, we have a mover. Mr. Barry, Mr.
Thank
Cullen.
you, Your Worship. Acting Mayor. I'd like to move that a 10-year municipal tax incremental financing be provided to 6825738 Manitoba Limited for the redevelopment of the vacant portion of 3409 Victoria Avenue. That would be under roll number 423301, comprised of approximately 38,000 square feet of commercial space, with said 10-year commencing in the first year in which the community revitalizing levy is paid to the property owner.
Seconder, please. Councillor Cameron. Just before we get into debate and discussion, we do have Sandy Trudel on the line to answer any questions about this grant, in case there's any from council that wish to be answered.
That would be great if we could have Sandy speak on it, if she could.
Ms. Trudel, are you prepared to speak on that?
Absolutely. So temporarily vacant for the past 12 years, despite 3 different ownership groups and proactive marketing of the site by local national realtors and the experienced ownership group. The site faces characteristics of areas similar to that of the downtown, such as being home to an underutilized building in a fully serviced area of the city, decreasing property values, reluctance from retailers and professional services to locate away from the key commercial hub of the 18th Street, and the existing building that is not in keeping with current commercial standards, thus requiring significant upgrades, and last but not least, a negative retail stigma caused by the long-term vacancy. Over the past 12 years, the assessed value has increased by $5.4 million, and the property taxes collected have decreased by $264,000 annually. The property owner has a 3-phase plan to redevelop the site that would see an additional $13.5 to $15 million invested through the redevelopment of the vacant building and the addition of several standalone pad sites along Victoria Avenue and 34th Street. However, the developer is unable to proceed with the upgrade without tenants confirmed, as property taxes will jump significantly after improvements, yet the revenue stream will not. So to provide stability in operating costs while they move forward with site upgrades and work to secure quality tenants, they are requesting a 10-year TIF on the vacant portion of the existing building. This will provide much-needed stability in operating costs and flexibility in the type of leases they can offer to attract tenants. TIFs have proven to be successful tools to redevelop underutilized areas all across North America, including here in downtown Brandon. And a TIF offers no risk to the municipality, as the incremental taxes collected after redevelopment are not paid until the owner has fully paid their tax bill. Thus, current taxes continue to flow to the municipality and the school division, and only for the agreed upon length of time of the TIF do the incremental taxes go back to the property owner. And then, of course, once the TIF duration has come to conclusion, then both the municipality and the school division will receive a greatly increased tax revenue from the redeveloped site. So with that summary, I'd be happy to answer any questions that council might have.
Thank you, Ms. Trudell. Any questions from council to Ms. Trudell before we go into debate? Councillor Fawcett?
Yes, thank you, through your worship, to Ms. Trudell. There was discussion at one point that the 5 pad sites were not included in that. Am I still understanding that correctly?
You are correct. At this time, the TIF that has been requested is on a portion of the existing building. It is the building that is faced with significant barriers, and it is our belief that once that building is brought up to current standards and it has tenants that are occupying that space, it will have changed stigma associated with that site such that there will be interest in developing standalone pad sites. So the TIF is only on the vacant portion of the existing building. The standalone sites that will be developed will be taxed as per all other normal properties in the community.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Trudell? Councillor Cameron?
Thank you, through your worship, to Ms. Trudell. I was just hoping you could reiterate, maybe for people that are listening at home or for council's benefit as well, that there isn't a financial risk for the city until the property is completed. There's no funds that are outlaid in the interim until the property is completed. That's correct?
that is one of the beauties of tax increment financing, is at no time is there a risk to municipality. Basically, when the site is redeveloped and the property value has been reassessed, then the new taxes are levied onto the property owner in their entirety. Once the property owner pays those full taxes, then and only then is the process such that the incremental growth will then be returned to them for that period of time. So there is absolutely no risk to the municipality or to the school division when you go down the incentive road of a tax increment financing route.
Any other questions for Ms. Trudell? Seeing none, Mr. Councillor Collin, as the mover, you wish to open debate then?
Thank you. This property is what we would know as the old Zellers building or the old Kmart building that has been vacant now for quite a few years. As it remains vacant, the property value is actually dropping, so our potential to have taxes coming from this property is actually becoming less and less each year. So it is this particular tax incremental financing proposal that we're trying to do is to create a catalyst for this particular property so that we can get it redeveloped and get it back on the tax roll within the next 10 years. So that's kind of the plan of how we're trying to do this now. It's kind of obvious that it has been vacant for a long time. I know that the people in my ward are extremely happy to see some movement that has started to occur on this property. And it is for the actual existing building that remains empty at this time. So the actual any pads or development pieces that would be added onto this would be considered as new development and be treated like anything else.
Councillor Cameron, as seconder, wish to?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just would like to add that it's been Ms. Trudell's been working on this file for a long, long time. Councillor Cullen and I met somewhere between 18 and 24 months ago with the owners, so they've been through quite a bit to get to this point and get it moving, and probably far more patience than I would have had this project. So I think this is a great plan for the city and especially for that site to get it up and moving. So I'm assuming we'll all be on board and get this in place.
Anyone else for debate on this matter right now? Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. I would support this motion, and primarily for the reason I absolutely love, and most of the citizens in the city really appreciate having a grocery store up in that area. And so it would be nice to see some more complementary services around the grocery store, because I would not want to see that service being lost for our citizens. So I'm approving this, and it's long overdue that we get something happening on that property.
Any other councillor wish to enter debate? No? I'll just kind of add my 2 cents worth on this one as well. As Councillor Collin had spoken, this is a property that's been sitting vacant for many, many years, been used very sporadically for different things. I know a lot of people will remember the Halloween store will sometimes go in there from time to time. But really, it's a large building and a large lot that's kind of got deteriorated over the years. And with this type of program, we're finally seeing somebody that's interested in developing this and bring it up to a standard and a code that the citizens in that area and the city, I think, will be very proud of, and probably wouldn't be able to do it without programs like this. So I myself will be supporting this. I think it's a great idea. And again, I just want to reiterate why His Worship had to leave the chair, as because he does own a business that's neighboring to that he felt maybe that it'd be best if he vacate the chair in this discussion. So. Councillor Parker?
Yes, on that vein, I should just add that the reason that Councillor Cullen and I met was the mayor excused himself from that meeting way back when originally, so he stayed arm's length from this thing from the get-go. So
Great, thank you for that information. That's very important. Thank you. Seeing no more hands, I'm going to call for the question. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And you will get a better looking guy to look at on the screen now as he comes back in. So
That was very well run, though. That was very well run.
Good job.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Barry. And next item of business, Madam Clerk.
Is an amendment to the Affordable Housing Grant for 19 13th Street. And the applicant is the Community Health and Housing Association.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. This would be on behalf of Councillor Desjardins. I move that the City of Brandon amend the Affordable Housing Grant approved on September 4th, 2018 in the amount of $126,000 for Community Health and Housing Association Westman Region, formerly known as Company 697720, Manitoba Association Incorporated, and Western Canadian Mental Health Association Westman Region, to permit the above grant to be used for the construction of 9 self-contained bachelor suites, and further that the City of Brandon commit to an annual tax offsetting grant equal to 50% of the general municipal portion of the annual taxes for the second floor of 19 13th Street for a period of 20 years once the project construction is complete.
Seconder, please. Councillor Lupke. Mover wish to speak?
No, I believe I'm okay, Your Worship. It looks predominantly to be a name change for one on the motion.
And Ms. Trudell is on the line on this. I think one of the other fundamental issues was that they reconfigured the project to take it down from, was it 13 suites down to 9, but then adding in some addictions beds in that portion. So if Ms. Trudell is on the line and wanted to add something, we'd certainly welcome that.
Other key elements that I will note for council is that when the original motion was passed, the 50% tax offsetting grant was applied to the entire building. With the change that Your Worship has noted, which is the switch of the main floor into eviction unit versus a residential unit, it means that the first floor of the building is no longer eligible for the tax offsetting grant because it does not comply with the eligibility criteria set forth in the existing bylaw. So if council sees fit to continue with the capital grant, which is what staff is recommending, and if they would also like to consider a 50% tax offsetting grant for the main floor, they would need to provide direction to staff to proceed with crafting a bylaw that would give council the authority to approve the 50% tax offsetting for the main floor as well as the second floor, though the second floor is covered off through the current bylaw.
Very good. Questions of Ms. Trudell on that piece? Not seeing any. Thank you, Sandy. Back to the main motion and discussion of that. Not seeing any other discussion. Are you ready for the question? Call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, please.
Is the citizen appointments to the Brandon Downtown Development Corporation.
And Councillor Fawcett. I'm sure Councillor Desjardins would have moved it if he was here, but you go ahead, please.
So thank you, through your worship, on behalf of Councillor Desjardins. I purposely said that differently for him, if he's listening. That the following citizens be appointed to the Brandon Downtown Development Corporation Board of Directors for the term of office to begin April 1st, 2020 and end March 31st, 2023. Carly Gasparini and Ryan Shields. Both have been previously on the board, currently, have finished a 3-year term and are eligible for the 3-year, and I think they were quite pleased that they would consider doing that. They've done a good job, and they now will have, I think, 3 more years, and then that would expire them if they...
Correct. Seconder, please. Councillor Chaboyer. Movers to speak. I've done some speaking.
Yeah, through your worship, I think on behalf of Councillor Desjardins, everything's fine.
I can attest to the fact that the BDDC just met today via the Teams electronic means. Councillor Desjardins did attend that meeting, as did Carly Gasparini and Ryan Shields, so they're certainly very contributing members. Other discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Consideration of the tender for the Phase 2 of the Weeping Tile System upgrade at the A.R. McDermott Complex.
Councillor Parker.
I can do this for Councillor Desjardins. That the bid from Ben Weeb Construction 1985 Limited to carry out the A.R. McDermott Civic Complex Weeping Tile System upgrade Phase 2 as per tender and specifications at a cost of $117,721 net of GST be approved. And further, that the expected total cost be expended from the reserves as follows: $88,000 from the Municipal Building Maintenance Reserve, $35,000 from the Municipal Building Reserve, and $47,000 from the A.R. McDermott Reserve.
Seconder by Councillor Cullen. Who wishes to speak?
I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if Ian wants to say something about it. I'm bringing us up to date a little bit, I guess.
In Ian's wheelhouse, if there are questions, come on ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I haven't got a lot of history on this. Mr. Yeomans, before he retired, was spearheading the project, but I did I did get some notes from Lindsay and Marie. So what I can tell you is how we arrived at this. Like, Phase 1 was completed as an emergency, and as an immediate action was required. When Procurement Service consulted engineering in the fall of 2019, engineering confirmed that the Phase 2 could proceed as a normal procurement project, as the work did not require immediate completion. Engineering and procurement were finalizing the bid documents the week of March 16th, with plans to post the following week upon receipt of the finalized drawings from the consulting engineer. The procurement manager became aware on March 17th that the RM building would be closed to the public in the near future, would be closed, and the site inspection was scheduled for April 2nd. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, discussions were initiated to determine whether it was appropriate or publicly advertise the project given unknown conditions. Further to this, it was an unknown whether bidders would be able to obtain bonding. Status of insurance firms were unknown at the time, as were requirements on the tender. The procurement manager deemed it would not be appropriate to publicly advertise a tender with the risk associated with the project on the requirement for bonding removed. There could be a risk also to employees and contractors by not reducing the number of attendees at the site visit. After consultation with engineering, it was agreed that a private opportunity would be issued to 3 contractors from whom the city had worked with previously would be comfortable awarding without having bonding in place. While normal procurement practices were not followed, competitive bidding was still obtained to determine the best value for this project.
Very good. Questions of Mr. Broom while he's up?
Makes sense.
Thank you, Ian. Back to the main motion then. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Funding for the 42nd Street Road project.
Of the Councillor Cullen, is that your neighborhood?
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that an additional $83,100 be extended from the Capital Development Reserve of the city's contribution toward the 42nd Street Road project as per the development agreement for 507 42nd Street.
Councillor Reggio seconding, or?
Yes, I will, but I'd like to point out that the councillor should have kept his glasses on. It's 89,000, not 83.
I stand corrected.
So we know what we're moving and seconding then, but you did second that, a correct number?
Yeah, one gray hair correcting another gray hair.
All righty. Very good. Mover wish to speak?
No, thank you, Your Worship. If we could have maybe someone speak on why we were...
This one is in Mr.
Having to take away.
Kuzniak's department.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. This project was a city covenant of a development agreement signed a number of years ago that was expected to be required last year. The developer did not reach the milestone in which we paid for our portion of the road development for 42nd Street. And then late in the year it was missed when it came to rebudgeting it to this year. So the developer is expected to reach their construction completion in spring or early summer of this year, for which time the city would pay its obligation from the development agreement.
Kind of a housekeeping matter. Any questions of Mr. Kuzniak while he's up? Seeing none. Thank you, Aaron. Back to the main motion. Any further discussion? Call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And before we get, could you call Councillor Desjarlais back now? He may want to speak on the next item. In which case you might need Mr. Hammond to work the controls again.
Hi, you're back online?
Yes, I'm back on the call.
Okay.
Just turn down the line.
Okay, hopefully you can hear all right. Go from here.
Okay.
Okay. Track here. So next item, Madam Clerk.
Is consideration of electronic meetings of City Council.
So listed as a policy matter. So as my belief that the process sort of belongs to the body, that being City Council. So the City Clerk has certainly done an excellent job of gathering together all of the pertinent information. Some of it was provided in response of a inquiry earlier on, but again, I thought it should be a democratic process that we deal through resolution without going through the whole report. Essentially, we got two options, although maybe somebody would see some other option perhaps, which would be happy to hear, but really we could either move the next number of meetings to online Teams is the program that the city tends to use, where each councillor would be provided with a laptop if they don't have a suitable one that the program can be loaded on, and then we would just be calling in. It's a video and audio. Those can be recorded as a package and then replayed as we do now on YouTube or WCG, so that the public would be able to get to see the council meeting, but it would not be live. Then the alternative to that would be to continue on in the process that we have, using the physical distancing that the staff have worked out, and still providing an opportunity for teleconferencing. I would say we might, if council elects to go with item B, I think we would ask IT to even consider some other tweaks to that system. As you can see, it's still not the best system for those that tend to want to call in. So that said, we'll open it up and someone can make a motion or begin the discussion. Councillor Lupke?
Sure. I just, the first thing that immediately comes to mind for me, Your Worship, is there technically the opportunity to do a hybrid model for those councillors that don't wish to attend in person to actually use Teams, and those that do wish to attend in person could still do that? Because I didn't see that as one of the options. I just wondered if that's not a technical possibility.
If I may, Your Worship, to Councillor Lupke, I thought of that earlier this afternoon, actually, and I'm not sure how the broadcast would be captured through Teams and participation here. In that, I mean, if we do it as our normal YouTube streaming, how do the people that are on the Teams portion of the meeting get conveyed on that? But I would certainly look at, I'm sorry, I had a bit of a loss. I'm not sure if IT has that capability or not, but I would think that's part of the stumbling block, is that if it's all Teams, we can record it and rebroadcast, but if it's split, I'm not sure how we incorporate the Teams portion into the live YouTube stream. That being said, I just thought of something. We could have it, the Teams people on the video screen, right? And then it would be recorded as part of that.
So we could be on to something. Councillor Parker, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Desjardins.
Through our laptop there that can get broadcast, right?
Yeah.
I don't see how it's any different what Councillor Lupke is suggesting. We could have Teams in front of us here, and you still record the Teams. I don't know whether we need to record both, but you can record the Teams version and replay it, and not the live portion, right? I mean,
you could be in this room and physically and be participating in the Teams meeting as well. Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to let Councillor Desjardins in. He had partially raised this matter, so I'm not sure if you can hear us, Councillor Desjardins.
Yeah, I can. So,
Go ahead if you had something.
You can all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So, first off, I want to recognize the effort that administration has gone through to create some social distancing in the council chambers. I will say it's a bit of a challenge participating from home. You can't be on the phone conference and be watching the live stream because there's a tape delay. I'm looking at Rick right now 10 seconds ago, and I'll see him smile here shortly, acknowledging that. And then when you hear people on the phone calls like Sandy, it's really hard to hear them. It's also hard to hear, there it is, there's the smile. And it's also hard to hear Councillor Fawcett, a few other councillors who are on their mics. And so it just made sense to switch back to the live stream. And you don't feel like you're really participating, sort of in real time or given the or you don't feel like you have the same opportunity to participate in the conversation, the dialogue. And so we've been running, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who is in a work environment where a lot of our meetings have switched to Teams and Zoom. But not only that, even prior to that, a lot of our bi-weekly meetings at the Assiniboine Community College, for example, we would Zoom people in from other areas, from Winnipeg, from Saskatchewan, and we'd also record those meetings, and they would be up on the screen. So I think where Councillor Lupke and Councillor Parker was going, there's probably is a hybrid version that we could use here if there were members of council who wanted to continue to meet in council chambers.
Thank you, Councillor Desjardins. I can say, and Mr. Hammond may add to this, that the Emergency Operation Center meetings, we were originally having them all live, but in a big room at the AR McDermott, and there were 10 people involved, very widely spread out. But then for just expediency and everything else, they moved it to Teams, but I'm going to say typically 7 out of 10 people are on Teams, and about 3 people that are typically working out of the EOC anyways are doing it from EOC. So we have a bit of a hybrid system down there. Now, admittedly, we don't have the responsibility of recording them and making them available to the public and the like. I think that's just an added little wrinkle that can be overcome. So I think if that's sort of the general direction that council might like to take, then we could sort of, come up with a sort of best of both worlds program that those that want to come in and do it can, and those that want to do it from home can as well, but have a certainly more meaningful experience and more meaningful input than we're providing up till now. So just to kind of make it official, a resolution to some effect would be in order. Councillor Lupke.
That in the form of a motion, Your Worship?
That'd be good.
Okay, I move that we move to a hybrid model moving forward for our council meetings to allow councillors who wish to come to council chambers and meet as per normal to be able to do that, and those that wish to participate via a electronic service such as Teams, that they would be allowed to do that as well.
Thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Parker. Discussion. Councillor Parker.
Sorry, I may consider just amending that or touching it up just a little bit to say that the electronic version would be the officially recorded version to the municipal requirements. Is that?
Well, we have the requirements, so we can't really do anything that offends the requirements. So administration will have to take that into account. So, your point's taken. But,
okay, that's good.
Yes. Could also add perhaps that if we need to have staff members participate as well in that regard, perhaps add that to the portion of the motion as well.
Yeah, well, and again, that would be the advantage because most of the staff are on Teams and are, just have it already loaded into their laptop, so that would be easy. Further discussion? Councillor Reggio?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's no secret that I'm a dinosaur when it comes to technology, and I kind of like this because it gives me the option of either coming here or using the technology. And, let's face it, the coronavirus is not going to be here forever, but this could prepare us for future pandemics, and I'm sure there'll be some of those, but I'm going to support this motion.
Okay, Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. I prefer to come in council chambers, but I would like to have the option of participating electronically. And having said that, I would like to have all the appropriate training, and perhaps if I need a microphone, because the only electronic media I use now at home is through FaceTime, and it can pick up, voice and video. So I don't know. We started using the team portion at work, but we could only provide input via texting, because we didn't have the appropriate equipment on our desktop. So that's the only thing is I want to make sure that if I do want to participate like this, that I get appropriate training and access to some type of laptop or something, even if it's just in the short term, to be able to participate like that.
Go ahead,
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Chaboyer, I have discussed this at quite some length with the IT department, and they do have equipment available for all members of council if everyone chose to stay at home that would have both a built-in microphone and camera on the laptop. So that would be the option. And if you attend in person in the chamber, that's available. We would make sure that was available to whoever was here as well. I don't believe you can do it off of your hard-wired in, but we would have laptops available here as well. And they are prepared to do some testing and training with you to make sure that you're comfortable using that platform.
One thing this could lead to is when a person's away, he could possibly participate remotely We haven't talked about
There you
that
go.
yet, but. Okay, any further discussion? Again, I'll go back to the telephone there before we close. Any further discussion from Councillor Desjardins or Brown?
No, other than I completely agree with the last statement. I was thinking of a couple of years ago when I was in Quebec and missed an important council meeting, and we could have been using Teams at the time. And I'm sure there's been a couple other times when Councillor Parker and Councillor Cullen's backs were out that they could have been laid up and joining us from home. So,
Well said. Okay, I think we're ready for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? I believe Councillor Desjardins and Brown are in favor.
yeah.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Under the order of bylaws, Your Worship, bylaw number 7262, which is to repeal the multifamily affordable housing program.
So we got about 8 or 10 bylaws here, all in first reading, and I'm just going to say in advance that it's our practice that first reading of bylaws is not debatable, so the public may see us go fairly rapidly through these. First reading kind of gets them, starts the process and gets them on the table. So the first one then, Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. I move that bylaw number 7262 to repeal the bylaw number 6917 to establish the multifamily affordable housing program to provide financial assistance for affordable housing projects in the city of Brandon be read a first time.
Seconded by Councillor Lupke. First reading not debatable. Going to call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next one, Madam Clerk.
Bylaw number 7263, which is to impose and levy property taxes for the year 2020.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you. I move that the bylaw number 7263 to impose and levy property taxes for the fiscal year 2020 be read a first time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Cameron. Again, no debate. Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Bylaw number 7269, which is to rezone a portion of 1501, I missed 7268, which is to open an H-shaped parcel of the lane located between Princess and Rosser Avenues and 28th and 29th Streets.
Councillor Cameron's ward.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move through that bylaw number 7268 to legally open the H-shaped parcel, lane block 79, plan 15, located between Princess and Rosser Avenue and 28th and 29th Street, be read a first time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Chaboyer. Again, no debate on first reading. Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Now, bylaw number 7269, which is to rezone a portion of 1501 Moreland Avenue.
Councillor Fawcett.
Yes, thank you, through your worship, to rezone a portion of 1501 Moreland Avenue from Development Reserve Zone to Residential Moderate Density and Parks and Recreation Zone. First reading.
Seconded by Councillor Chaboyer. And no debate on first reading. Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Bylaw number 7270, which is to rezone property at 1230 18th Street North.
Councillor Fawcett again.
Yes, through your worship, and I have a piece at the end I want to add. To the rezone property located at 1230 18th Street North from residential large lot zone to residential single detached zone, residential low density zone, and open space zone. First reading. And I would like to make a request in here, because after first reading, they generally will go to a public hearing. In this particular one, I was going to have a request that they hold the public hearing after the province allows us to meet with 25 people or more, knowing that there is people that are wanting to meet on this.
To withhold that. Okay, well, again, that won't be part of the motion, but the city clerk's got that message and she can put that through the planning staff. That's a good suggestion. So I'll ask for a seconder for that, though. Councillor Lupke. Of course, you're just seconding the first reading of the bylaw, and the other part is just sort of procedural. So, okay. Call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Bylaw number 7271, which is to rezone part of 417th Street North.
And Councillor Fawcett.
Yes, thank you, through your worship, to rezone part of 417th Street North from open space zone to commercial arterial zone.
Seconded by Councillor Cameron. Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Bylaw number 7272, which is to repeal bylaw 6873, the Home Renovation Tax Assistance Program.
Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that bylaw number 7272 to repeal bylaw number 6873, the Home Renovation Tax Assistance Program, to incentivize renovations and repairs by middle to low-income households in the city of Brandon, be read a first time.
Seconded by Councillor Chaboy. Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Bylaw number 7273, which is to create the Municipal Tax Incentive Financing Program for 3409 Victoria Avenue.
Hang on, just to keep it square, I'll just let you handle that from your seat there, Councillor Barry, if you would.
Again, thank you, Your Worship. Again, because of him owning a business beside the said property we're talking about, he's excused himself from this. So can I have a mover for that motion, please? Councillor Collin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that bylaw number 7273 to create a municipal tax incentive finance program for 3409 Victoria Avenue be read a first time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Cameron. Being first reading, there will be no debate. Call for the question. All those in favor? That's carried.
Did it without his glasses?
Thanks again, Councillor Barry. And next item, please.
May I have notice, Your Worship?
May give them notice this evening. Not seeing any. Next item, please.
A motion to adjourn would be in order.
Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Councillor Chaboyer. And before I call the question, tell everybody not to go anywhere. We've got a brief special meeting starting immediately after this one. So call for the question on the adjournment motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk?
Roll call, Your Worship. I've taken the roll and all members of council are present, including Councillor Desjardins and Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Reading of the call, Your Worship. I would confirm that on April 15th, 2020, in accordance with the Municipal Act, all members of council were given notice that a special meeting would be held this date to consider further readings to the 2020 tax levy bylaw. And as we have quorum and are in compliance with that requirement, we can proceed with this meeting.
Thank you. And next item, please.
Under the order of bylaws, bylaw number 7263, which is the 2020 tax levy bylaw.
Very good. Just by way of explanation, normally we would have a first reading of a bylaw at one meeting and then a subsequent meeting for the second and third readings, but given our sort of reduced number of meetings to respect COVID-19 situation, our tax levy bylaw, needs to be moved along in certain chronology of dates so that we can file our financial plan and tax levy with the province of Manitoba, and then the administration can begin to prepare the tax bills and all of the procedures that go along with that. So it was felt appropriate to have a special meeting immediately following the next one to give the tax levy bylaw both second and third reading. So that's the purpose of this. So a motion for this bylaw would be in order, please. Councillor Lupke.
Hey, Your Worship, I move that bylaw number 7263 to impose and levy property taxes for the fiscal year 2020 be read a second time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Cameron. Whoever wishes to speak?
No, Your Worship.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we're going to call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And third reading would be in order. Councillor Lupke,
I'll make the motion that the bylaw be read a third and final time.
seconded by Councillor Parker. Hang on a minute, I just want to make sure that getting comments from the other councillors.
No, we're good.
Okay. Councillor Brown lost his connection, but he'll text me if he's got any issues, I think. Okay, any further discussion then on third reading? Seeing none, we're going to call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried as well. Next item, please.
That's a unanimous, we need a
Oh,
recorded
yeah, sorry,
vote,
recorded vote. So it's unanimous unless I hear anything contrary from Councillor Desjarlais or Brown. So Councillor Desjarlais is on the line, and Councillor Brown will text me if he is not in favor. And I believe we're unanimous. And the next item, please.
Motion to adjourn would be in order, Your Worship.
Moved by Councillor Chaboyer, seconded by Councillor Barry.
Shake it.
Favor? Opposed? That is carried.